All right, everyone, welcome back. It is Chili again from A Hero's Guide to Asgartha, and today I'll be talking about the Designing Uniques article that was released on the 6th of February 2026. This is one of my favorite articles that's been released, and part of the reason I love it is they're once again taking us behind the curtain in terms of in this case, the iterative approach that they've taken to learning from how they design and develop uniques for each set to try to create the best meta, the best opportunity for us to be able to get something great and be able to use it. So let's read through today's article and then some of my thoughts and impressions associated to this, both from a player's perspective, but also a collector's perspective, and maybe potentially the aftermarket as well. So unique cards were one of the wildest innovations Altered brought to the table, and it was no small feat. With the release of Seeds of Unity, we wanted to make the best use of all the lessons learned throughout Altered's first year to reach what we believe is a turning point in unique design. In this article, Jacques Ernault, lead designer on Uniques, will look back at how the system evolved throughout our previous set releases, and present how our new core principles are going to improve Uniques from now on. From Beyond the Gates to Seeds of Unity, a learning journey beyond the gates. Experimentation. And boy, was it experimentation. We had some great uniques. We had some awful uniques. Now, the art cannot complain. Impact, there is definitely a big difference between what you got and what maybe some people got and what others got. Not only in terms of its cost if you were to sell it, but also in terms of its use in the game. When designing the uniques for Beyond the Gates, we tried to answer the question, how do we make unique cards actually work? The result was ambitious, but the gameplay experience wasn't always coherent. Power level was disparate. Oh, disparate. Uniques inherited some problems from early Altered design in how we evaluated the strength of various types of effects, and also introduced combo pieces with problematic play patterns. There is a lot to learn from there, and part of the way that you know that this was crazy experimentation is the amount of uniques that we still play that are from set one. In my mind, I would say the vast majority, more than 3/4, are probably still being played in the high meta from set one. Now, there was not only that issue with what they did, but the difference between a good unique and a poor unique or an average unique is just so huge. So, Trial by Frost and Whispers from the Maze, they in both of these sets, overcorrection, and for my mind, Trial by Frost worse than Whispers from the Maze. Starting with Trial by Frost, we tightened restrictions to release unique cards that wouldn't break the game. Balance improved, but while the ceilings on uniques was lower, which is why people don't play these uniques very often, the floor wasn't raised by enormous amounts. So if anything, you still had crappy uniques. You just didn't have great uniques, which meant people don't want to play this. They wanted to have the experience of some fantastic cards. The major issue was that we applied nerfs to a substantial amount of effects without adding enough buffs into the system. And then in Skybound Odyssey, practicality and hero focus. And I love what they're doing is making uniques, certain cards or families of uniques, more central to a hero rather than the faction. So uniques from Skybound Odyssey were designed around the time Trial by Frost released, so we finally had real-world feedback from both Set 1 and Set 2 to learn from. We got to be a little more ambitious and had new heroes to cater to, which created the perfect opportunity to get rid of some of the older, non-functioning effects that failed to support ideas and themes from the first three sets. Okay, so they rate, and then in Seeds of Unity, they're raising the bar. And I'll say this again: Skybound Odyssey uniques are great. Like the highs could be so great, but they required a level of setup. It wasn't just a given, and I love that. The complexities in the design is so much better. Now, of course, we all want broken uniques that you can just play at any time. But part of this is strategy. This is a card game. Bring the strategy in, set things up, get the combinations in place so that big bang can occur. So in Seeds of Unity, raising the floor, as players noticed, uniques from set 4 represented a step in the right direction, which allowed us to better understand which systematic changes were still required in order to reach the ideal power level and usability for these cards. This time, we raised the baseline to a point where we believe uniques now have a higher chance to find their place in the metagame, while having a clearer idea of how to properly harness their potency. This was made possible by questioning some of our previous assumptions and coming up with new truths about how to design them. And we're getting some beautiful cards here from the new set. I'll just make this go up a little bit. The Shell, a 3/3/2/3/2. When an arrow effect, if you control two or more permanents, resupply. Once again, I'm talking about there's a condition to be met, but the upside is huge. When I leave the expedition zone, if you control two or more permanents, draw a card. So if you don't have that, conditions are great. They still have a quick ability. Quick abilities to me in uniques are not what you want to do with them, right? You want to play them. You don't want to discard them. The second one is Urbex Specialist. Beautiful looking card. 3/3 for a 1/3/3. When played from hand, if I'm in contact, create a mana seed token in target player's landmark. And when you pass, if you control a fleeting token, draw a card. Upswing, but conditional. Really love that. The third one, just so you can see it all, I'll pop it up. Rika Caterer, 4/4 for 4/4/3. Two arrow effects. One, create a mana seed token in target player's landmarks. Great. So even though it's four, it's really going to cost you three. If you control two or more permanents, create an Ordis Recruit token in my expedition. Once again, another benefit that is conditional. I love it. I love it. That's what I think that should happen. None of these freebies without any real benefit. So there was a philosophical shift. What we learned. One, unique cards should try to work toward a specific hero or deck archetype instead of just adhering to their faction. Much like early common rare designs, we initially thought we could make uniques that just fit in a faction, hoping that eventually a hero or deck archetype would emerge to support them. It turns out that outside of rare occurrences, this requires more intent than anticipated. I would say no duh there, right? We released more uniques without a home than we would have liked. So we recently became more adamant about both removing uniques that try to do too many different things at once and buffing uniques trying to perform in a niche archetype. I love it, especially for uniques that can help some of these low performing heroes. The other thing that in my mind goes, you cannot just actually let's go talk about it in step two because that actually goes into it. Unique cards need a clear purpose beyond being a slight upgrade of a common or rare card, and in many cases I think they were a downgrade on the common or the rare. Okay, especially in set one. Due to our deck building rules, uniques are in direct competition with their common rare versions, asking players if they're worth upgrading the slot. While ensuring every unique is clearly above the line set by its common rare versions is something we already focus on. I don't think you've executed that 100% well early on. They're much better now. We also look closely at their intended role. If the common provides a core effect, the unique version can't make that effect harder to access. I completely agree, and you've failed so many times in this in the past. I hope that this is not the case. You don't want to have something that is worse than a common or the rare, or you have to go through too many hurdles if the upswing or the potential is not worth the investment. This could happen, for example, when adding restrictive conditions, limiting it to reserve only or increasing the mana cost. And if doubling down on the common's core role doesn't create a compelling card, the unique may be better served by shifting to a different but related purpose. So if you can't draw, can you resupply twice? Things like that, in my mind. Unique cards should maximize the amount of times they're played when drawn. When we started evaluating uniques, we applied heuristics learned from working on common and rare versions with a corresponding buff in power level. What we missed was how expendable commons and rares are, while uniques are not, and this has got to do with the entire mana system. It's fine to put a common into mana if its stats don't match the current terrain, its cost is too high, or if the effect isn't impactful right now. But uniques aren't put in decks to become mana orbs or to be discarded due to reserve limit. They are here to be played. I completely agree with this statement. You can see this reflected in the choices of players who selected uniques with flat statistics or no statistics at all, generally low mana cost, and effects that enable combos so powerful that they ignore the current game state entirely. And you can see here some beautiful, beautiful cards here. Helpful Diver, Studious Rookie, and Pinocchio. Like, for me, one of the things that, like, it should be an incredibly heart-wrenching decision to have to mana a unique. When I was talking to Nick about this, he was saying, yeah, sometimes they're just very costly, so you've got to get rid of them. But it shouldn't be an easy decision. It should be the last card that you'll be looking to eliminate from your deck when you're manaing. Improvements already implemented. So as sets released, improvements happened quietly and were foundational for applying some of the principles listed above. We removed overly restrictive and costly conditions. You may pay one, no more. Now, commons and rares can still have this, and that's fine, but make them less common in uniques. And they've said they've actually removed them altogether. I've got so many cards from set one that they would never play because I don't want to pay the extra cost. It's not beneficial for me to do that given the payback. Added conditional fallback effects. So they're removing this as well. Draw a card, otherwise resupply. Buffed high mana cards and reduce some of the extreme polarization and ratios of hand versus reserve strengths and stats versus effect strengths. So really trying to make changes that make you want to play these uniques more, to make them more impactful, but also making that decision to mana them even worse, more difficult to do. So improvements in Seeds of Unity, this set represents the biggest mechanical refinement so far, fully implementing lessons learned from Altered's first year. There's higher baseline value from reserve, and I think that makes sense because people can plan for it. If they're in your reserve, you can interact with it a little bit more. You know what's coming, it's no longer a surprise, so therefore you can give you a little bit extra benefit. Supportability is now way less in a card's global valuation. I think that's good. I personally believe you don't have a unique for its support abilities. You have a unique for what it's played and what its impact on the board state. Spike stats, now way less. I don't know if I believe with this. I actually think spike stats are really good, although I don't like having zeros. So having a zero stat is now viewed as an important drawback. And stat lines now favor symmetry, 2-2-2, 1-3-3. So basically just one movement away from the mean, or a single zero for fewer weird random distributions. Underwhelming effects way less. So boosts, which I think are pretty useful, they're becoming meh. They're not becoming important. And stricter mana caps, weak effects can't appear on high mana uniques makes a lot of sense, especially with people playing such low to the ground cards. New effects exclusions to prevent unfun or awkward sequencing. Example, if you're the first player, can't combine with something that says when I leave expedition due to the inability to benefit from that effect 2 days in a row. More desirable effects added, such as the newly featured mana seeds and variations on card draw. Love what they've done with mana seeds. Remove effects that were no longer relevant to the heroes featured in the set. Love it as well. So then you have a reason to go back and buy product from previous sets if you want certain styles or dynamics in your uniques. While previously the system was mostly additive, we are now trying to have a rotation where all effects aren't always available to uniques. They'll come and go based on which heroes and strategies we want to support, and I'll say this from a player base, which ones you want to play. Therefore, you may have to go back to Trial by Frost to get X, Y, or Z type of uniques. Faction shifted cards reworked when their original identity didn't translate well, and we're seeing that where each card is slightly different in the family that it belongs or the faction it belongs. More families now have no condition attachment to their core effects if their base card had none. Now, I do hope they don't go any writer all the old cards. Like, that's the past is the past. We'll move forward with the new cards and new dynamics. More families now have equal or better trigger for their core effects. For example, no more when I'm played from reserve, create a mana seed. On a card that had a when I'm played from anywhere, create a mana seed. Once again, looking for that upgrade. More families now have equal or better output for their core effect. For example, if the base card draws a card as its core effect, unique versions won't replace it with I gain 1 boost. We hope this gives you a better idea of how ambitious we went with this set. It's a real paradigm shift. We believe that this will alleviate some of the problems you faced with underwhelming uniques, but also level the playing field on some of the strongest ones. And once again, seeing some great cards. Houdini, Harry Houdini getting one. So what comes next? Our work on designing Seeds of Unity might be done, but the system keeps evolving. Our next priorities include getting better at identifying effect synergies and diversifying the roles uniques can take. We are looking for more robust systematic solutions to prevent mishaps like infinite Garrett loops or Phileas fogs having a dysfunctional effect. Once again, there are some Phileas fogs that are amazing, some are just absolutely poor. You want an effect that makes sense. And we would also love to experiment with true no effect uniques as an exciting new pursuit for collectors. I think there were a couple of those that basically had no text, but just increased stats. Finally, we'll be looking at whatever suggestions you have. With a switch to our new model of distribution, it is now much quicker for us to adapt to your feedback and have it impact the game. I love the idea in many cases. There may even come a point in time where cards that have certain text are no longer valid, or you remove that. So that's the errata for an effect type. And if I was to have my way, sorry, Bravos Hatter, I would do the double ramp completely eliminated for the game. Thank you. This project involves evolves through constant player conversation at events, online and in-game. Every comment and every match helps shape better unique cards. Thank you for being part of this creative journey. And I'll say from Equinox to Equinox, thank you for sharing this insight with us and for being willing to experiment and change. I do like where you're going. I do like the idea of, like, for me, making things a little bit more conditional, while in a condition that makes sense to get the buff. But again, I'm also grateful that the uniques that we're seeing nowadays are not a downgrade on the common or the rare. And at least that's the way I perceive it. I'm sure there's some, and we've got to keep on eliminating those changes. But on that, this is a great step in the right direction. And I'll leave you with that. I bid you adieu.